The auditorium of the National Performing Arts Competition buzzed with anticipation as Maya Rodriguez stood backstage, her worn ballet shoes clutched in trembling hands. At 17, she had traveled alone from her small desert town in New Mexico, carrying dreams that felt both impossibly large and fragile as glass. Through the curtain's gap, she could see the panel of judges, 3 stern faces behind a long table, their expressions carved from ice. The head judge, Victoria Sterling, was a legendary former prima ballerina, whose disapproval could end careers before they began. Beside her sat 2 equally formidable figures, a theatre director known for his cutting remarks and a choreographer, who had rejected hundreds of hopefuls that season alone. Maya's fingers traced the ribbons of her shoes. They were old, patched multiple times, nothing like the pristine pink satin worn by the other contestants. She'd seen the whispers, the sidelong glances from competitors in their expensive leotards and perfectly coiffed hair. A brown-skinned girl in second-hand dance wear didn't fit their image of a classical dancer. Number 47, a stagehand called her number. Maya stepped into the blinding spotlight. The judges barely looked up from their clipboards. Name? Victoria Sterling asked, her tone flat. Maya Rodriguez. The head judge's eyes finally lifted, traveling slowly from Maya's face to her worn shoes. A slight curl appeared at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, something colder. And you're here to perform ballet? The emphasis on the final word dripped with skepticism. Yes, I'll be dancing too. We can see what you've submitted. The theatre director leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. From where, exactly, did you receive your training? I studied with Mrs. Chen in my hometown. She danced with, never heard of her, he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. This is a national competition. We typically see students from established academies. Humiliated, SAB, Pacific Northwest. He trailed off, his implication clear. Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. I understand, sir. But I've prepared thoroughly, and I'd be grateful for the opportunity to. Let's not waste time, the choreographer cut in, checking her watch. We have 17 more contestants today. Begin when ready. Maya walked to center stage, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd heard the doubt in their voices, seen the judgment in their eyes. It was the same skepticism she'd faced her entire life, teachers who assumed she'd be better suited for hip-hop, or jazz, dance supply shops where salespeople looked surprised when she asked for point shoes, competition programs where her photo stood out like a single dark star in a pale constellation. She took her position, waiting for the music to begin, but before the first notes could play, Victoria Sterling held up her hand. Stop. The auditorium fell silent. Young lady, the head judge said, leaning forward, I'm going to be frank with you. This competition represents the pinnacle of classical dance in this country. It opens doors to companies, scholarships, international opportunities. Are you certain ballet is the right path for you? There are many other dance forms where you might find a more natural fit. The words hung in the air like poison. Maya stood frozen, the familiar sting of discrimination wrapping around her chest like thorns. She'd heard variations of this her entire life, always couched in fake concern, always designed to push her away from the art form she loved more than breathing. The other judges nodded, murmuring agreement. Perhaps contemporary dance, the theatre director suggested. Or maybe you should consider other talents altogether. Something crystallized inside Maya in that moment. She thought of her teacher, Mrs. Chen, who had fled China and rebuilt her life teaching dance in a small New Mexico town. She thought of the hours spent practicing in her family's garage, when they couldn't afford studio fees. She thought of her grandmother, who cleaned office buildings at night so Maya could have lessons. She thought of every little girl who looked like her and dreamed of dancing Swan Lake. With respect, Maya said, her voice quiet but unwavering, I'm certain. May I please dance? Victoria Sterling exchanged glances with her fellow judges. Very well. But make it quick. The music began, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, the White Swan variation, one of the most technically demanding pieces in classical ballet. Maya had chosen it deliberately. Not the easier contemporary piece, or the crowd-pleasing jazz number some had suggested. This, the first notes filled the auditorium, and Maya began to move. What happened next would be discussed for years to come in dance circles across the country. Maya didn't just dance, she transformed. Every arabesque was a line of poetry, every pirouette a statement of defiance and grace. Her worn shoes became irrelevant as she seemed to float across the stage, her movements so fluid that gravity itself appeared to bow before her. The technical precision was flawless, her 32 fouettes executed with the mechanical perfection of a Swiss watch, but it was more than technique. It was art. It was truth. It was everything ballet was meant to be. The judges' expressions shifted. The theatre director's arms uncrossed. The choreographer set down her pen. Victoria Sterling sat up straighter, her eyes widening. Maya poured everything into those 4 minutes. Every doubt she'd faced, every door slammed in her face, every person who had looked at her skin and decided she didn't belong. But she also poured in the joy, the pure ecstatic love of movement and music, the feeling of flight that made every hardship worthwhile. When the final note echoed into silence, Maya held her finishing pose, chest heaving, sweat gleaming on her skin. The auditorium was absolutely quiet. Then Victoria Sterling stood. The legendary judge who never smiled, whose approval was rarer than diamonds, rose from her seat and began to applaud. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. The other judges stood as well. Then the stagehands backstage. Then the contestants waiting in the wings, even the ones who had whispered about her earlier. The applause built into a roar. Maya straightened slowly, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. Victoria Sterling stepped forward, and for the first time that day, there was no coldness in her expression. Instead, something that might have been shame flickered across her face. "Miss Rodriguez," she said, her voice carrying across the stage. "I owe you an apology. We all do." She gestured to her fellow judges. "What I witnessed just now was extraordinary. Not just technically perfect, but emotionally devastating. That is what ballet is supposed to be." She paused, seeming to struggle with her next words. "In my 40 years in this industry, I have allowed my preconceptions to blind me. I have judged dancers by their backgrounds, their appearances, their training, rather than by their artistry. You have reminded me why I fell in love with dance in the first place. It is not about pedigree or packaging. It is about the human spirit taking flight." Maya's vision blurred with tears now, but she refused to let them fall. "You are precisely what classical ballet needs," Victoria continued. "And I hope you will accept my personal invitation to audition for the American Ballet Theater's Summer Intensive. Full scholarship." The theater erupted in applause again. Backstage, after the formal competition concluded, Maya placed first, unanimously. She was surrounded by reporters and other dancers. But she found herself face to face with a young girl, maybe 10 years old, with dark skin and hopeful eyes. "Was it scary?" the girl asked quietly. "When they said those things?" Maya knelt down to her level. "Terrifying," she admitted. "But you know what I learned? When people try to make you feel small, because of how you look or where you come from, the best response is to be so undeniably excellent that their prejudice becomes impossible to maintain. Don't shrink yourself to fit their limited imagination. Make them expand their vision instead." The girl nodded solemnly, then hugged Maya tight. Later that night, in her modest hotel room, Maya called her grandmother. "Abuela," she said, "remember when you told me that sometimes you have to dance twice as beautifully just to be seen at all? Sigh, Mija. You were right. But here's what I learned today. When you dance with your whole truth, when you refuse to be diminished, you don't just change their minds. You change what's possible for everyone who comes after you." Her grandmother was crying now, but they were happy tears. "I'm so proud of you, Maya. Not because you won, but because you showed them who you are and refused to apologize for it." Maya looked out the window at the city lights below, thinking of all the young dancers of color, who dreamed of classical ballet, who would face the same skepticism and barriers she had. But maybe now, the path would be a little wider. The door a little more open. She had danced for them as much as for herself, and tomorrow, she would dance again.